The relentless Arizona sun beat down on Zara Adams' face as she awoke with a start, her throat parched and lips cracked from dehydration. The carriage that had been carrying her westward was nowhere in sight, nor were her belongings or the men who had promised to escort her safely to Tucson. It was 1879, and Zara's dream of starting anew as a schoolteacher in the Arizona Territory had turned into a nightmare of betrayal and abandonment. She struggled to her feet, her emerald green travel dress covered in dust and torn at the hem. The distant mountains wavered in the heat as she squinted against the blinding light, trying to get her bearings. Her small frame shook with fear and anger as the realization dawned on her the men had drugged her tea, robbed her of everything, and left her to die in the merciless desert. "Water," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to her own ears. She had nothing, no canteen, no supplies, and no idea which direction might lead to civilization. The vast emptiness of the desert stretched endlessly around her, broken only by scattered cacti and the occasional scrubby bush. Zara stumbled forward, her once practical boots now instruments of torture as they rubbed against her blistered feet. She had been raised in Boston, sheltered and educated, utterly unprepared for the harsh realities of the West. Yet something stubborn in her refused to lie down and accept death. She would walk until she could walk no more. The sun climbed higher as she pushed forward, her vision blurring. By midday, she had resorted to seeking momentary shelter beneath a large saguaro, its meager shadow barely enough to shield her face. That's when she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats cutting through the still desert air. At first, she thought it was a hallucination born of desperation, but the rhythm grew louder, more distinct. With what little strength she had left, Zara rose to her feet and waved her arms frantically. "Help!" she cried, though her voice was little more than a rasp. "Please help me!" The rider changed direction, heading toward her. As he drew closer, she could make out a tall man atop a chestnut stallion. His wide-brimmed hat cast a shadow over his face, and his duster coat flapped gently behind him as he rode. He pulled his horse to a stop a few feet from her. "Madam, you all right?" His voice was deep, tinged with concern. Zara tried to answer, but the world tilted beneath her feet. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a pair of concerned blue eyes and strong arms reaching out to catch her as she fell. When consciousness returned, Zara felt something cool and wet against her lips. Water precious, life-giving water trickled into her mouth. She gulped greedily. "Easy now," came that same deep voice. "Not too fast." Forcing her eyes open, she found herself cradled against a man's chest, his canteen tilted carefully to her lips. His face came into focus, tanned by the sun, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' worth of stubble. Those same blue eyes that had been her last sight now studied her with concern. "Thank you," she managed, her voice slightly stronger after the water. "Name's Hayes Xavier," he said, helping her to sit upright. "Most folks just call me Hayes." "Zara Adams," she replied, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look. They left me here to die." Hayes' expression hardened. "Who did?" "The men I hired to escort me to Tucson. They drugged me, took everything, my money, my luggage, everything." He cursed under his breath. "Griffin's gang, I'd wager. They've been pulling that trick on travelers heading west." He looked around at the empty desert. "You're lucky I found you, been tracking a stray from my herd when I spotted you." Zara eyed the canteen longingly. Hayes noticed and offered it again. "It's my last bit of water," he said simply. "We'll have to make it last until we reach my ranch. It's about half a day's ride from here." She hesitated, then took another small sip. "I can't take your last water." "You ain't taking it, I'm sharing it," he replied, his voice matter of fact. "And we'd best get moving before this heat gets any worse." With gentle efficiency, Hayes helped Zara to her feet and onto his horse. She swayed slightly, still weak from her ordeal, and he quickly mounted behind her, one arm securing her against his chest. "I'll get you to safety, Miss Adams," he said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "Just hold on." As they rode across the desert, Zara found herself drawing strength from the solid presence behind her. Hayes Xavier was unlike any man she had known in Boston. There was something raw and authentic about him, devoid of the pretense she'd grown accustomed to in society. "What brings a lady like yourself to Arizona territory?" he asked after they had ridden in silence for some time. "I'm to be the new schoolteacher in Tucson," she replied. "Or at least I was. I don't know how I'll manage now with everything gone." "Schoolteacher, huh?" There was a note of respect in his voice. "We could use more educated folks out here. Too many can't read their own names." The journey continued as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. Hayes rationed the water carefully between them, always insisting she drink first. By the time the landscape began to change, with more vegetation appearing and the distant outline of buildings taking shape, Zara felt herself growing stronger not just from the water and rest, but from the quiet confidence of the man who had saved her life. Hayes Ranch was modest but well-maintained. A main house built of sturdy logs and stone stood proudly against the backdrop of distant mountains, with a barn and several outbuildings nearby. A few ranch hands looked up curiously as Hayes rode in with Zara, but a quick word from him sent them back to their tasks without questions. "Mrs. Fernandez," Hayes called as he helped Zara down from the horse. An older Mexican woman appeared in the doorway of the house, her eyes widening at the sight of Zara's condition. "Dios mío," she exclaimed, hurrying forward. "What happened?" "Griffin's gang," Hayes explained succinctly. "Miss Adams needs food, water, and rest. And perhaps some clean clothes if you have anything that might fit her." Mrs. Fernandez nodded, already taking Zara by the arm with motherly concern. "Come, señorita, we will take care of you." The next few hours passed in a blur for Zara. She was bathed, given a simple but clean dress that Mrs. Fernandez had altered from one of her own, and fed a hearty stew that restored her strength considerably. By evening, she sat on the porch of Hayes' home, watching the spectacular sunset paint the desert in hues of gold and crimson. Hayes joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He had cleaned up as well, his face now cleanly shaved, revealing a strong jawline and the hint of a smile that transformed his entire countenance. "How are you feeling?" he asked, handing her a cup. "Much better, thanks to you," she replied. "I don't know how to repay your kindness, Mr. Xavier." "Hayes," he corrected gently, "and there's no debt between us. Anyone with a decent bone in their body would have done the same." "I'm not sure that's true," Zara said, thinking of the men who had left her to die. "There seems to be a shortage of decent people in my experience lately." Hayes settled into the chair beside her. "The West brings out the best and worst in folks. It's a hard land, but a fair one in its way." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "You still aiming to reach Tucson?" Zara sighed. "I must, though how I'll manage it now, I don't know. My letters of introduction, my contract with the school board, everything is gone." "I've got business in Tucson next week," Hayes offered. "I could take you there, help you sort things out with the school board. They know me, I sell beef to most of the establishments in town." "You would do that for a stranger?" Zara asked, surprised by the offer. Hayes' blue eyes met hers steadily. "You're not exactly a stranger anymore, Miss Adams." Something in his gaze made Zara's heart beat faster. She looked away, focusing on the darkening sky. "I suppose not." The next morning, Zara awoke feeling renewed. Mrs. Fernandez had given her the small guest room, simple but comfortable, with a window overlooking the ranch yard. She dressed in the borrowed clothes and made her way to the kitchen, where she found the housekeeper preparing breakfast. "Buenos dias, señorita," Mrs. Fernandez greeted her warmly. "You look much better today." "I feel much better," Zara admitted, offering to help with the breakfast preparations. The older woman showed her how to make tortillas, laughing gently at Zara's clumsy first attempts. Hayes entered the kitchen just as Zara was proudly holding up a somewhat misshapen tortilla. Their eyes met, and he smiled a genuine smile that reached his eyes and made something flutter in her chest. "Careful, Mrs. Fernandez," he teased. "You might find yourself replaced if Miss Adams keeps improving." Zara laughed, the sound surprising her. It had been so long since she had genuinely laughed. I think Mrs. Fernandez's position is quite safe. After breakfast, Hayes suggested showing Zara around the ranch. You'll be here for a few days before we head to Tucson. Might as well get to know the place. The tour revealed a modest but prosperous operation. Hayes had about 60 head of cattle, a small horse breeding program, and enough land to support them comfortably. He employed 4 ranch hands full-time with occasional extra help during roundup season. It's not much compared to some of the big spreads, he admitted as they walked back toward the house. But it's mine, free and clear. It's wonderful, Zara said sincerely. You've built something real here. What about you? Hayes asked. What made a Boston lady decide to teach school in Tucson? Zara hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. My father died last year. He left considerable debts and our home was sold to pay his creditors. I needed to make my own way and teaching is the only skill I have that's marketable. Hayes nodded, his expression thoughtful. I'm sorry about your father. Losing mine is what brought me west in the first place. Really? He was a banker in Philadelphia. Had great plans for me to follow in his footsteps. When he passed, I realized I'd been living his dream, not mine. Hayes gestured to the land around them. This was my dream. You've done well making it come true, Zara observed. The next few days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Zara helped Mrs. Fernandez with household tasks, learning more about cooking over an open hearth and managing a frontier household than she ever could have from books. Hayes went about his ranch business, but always seemed to find time to check on her, to share meals, to sit on the porch and talk as the day ended. They spoke of books. Hayes had a small but treasured collection of volumes that surprised Zara with their variety. They debated politics, with Hayes showing a nuanced understanding that defied the simple cowboy label she had initially assigned him. And they laughed often and easily, the connection between them growing with each passing day. On the third evening, Hayes found Zara sitting alone on the porch, staring at the stars. He joined her silently, respecting her contemplative mood. The sky never looked like this in Boston, she finally said. There are so many stars here. It's one of the things I love most about this land, Hayes admitted. Makes a man feel small and significant all at once. Zara turned to look at him, struck by the poetry in his words. You're not what I expected, Hayes Xavier. Is that good or bad? He asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Good, she replied softly. Very good. Their eyes held for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Hayes cleared his throat and looked back at the stars. We'll head to Tucson day after tomorrow, he said. Should be there by nightfall if we get an early start. Zara nodded, surprised by the twinge of regret she felt at the prospect of leaving the ranch. I appreciate your escorting me. It's no trouble, he assured her. The night before their departure, Mrs. Fernandez prepared a special meal. The ranch hands joined them at the long table in Hayes' dining room, sharing stories and laughter. Zara found herself watching Hayes the way he interacted with his men, respectful and fair, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the quiet authority he carried without effort. After dinner, when the hands had returned to their bunkhouse and Mrs. Fernandez had retired for the evening, Hayes invited Zara to join him by the fireplace. He poured 2 small glasses of whiskey, offering one to her. To new beginnings, he toasted. Zara sipped the amber liquid, feeling its warmth spread through her. And unexpected friendships, she added. Is that what this is? Hayes asked, his voice low. Friendship, the question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Zara met his gaze steadily. I think it could be more, she admitted, surprising herself with her boldness, if circumstances were different. Hayes set his glass down and moved closer to her on the small sofa. What circumstances would those be? I'm headed to Tucson to start a new life. You have your ranch here. We've known each other less than a week. The practical obstacles tumbled from her lips even as her heart raced at his proximity. Time isn't always the best measure of knowing someone, Hayes said quietly. Sometimes you just know. His hand reached up to gently touch her cheek, and Zara felt herself lean into his touch. When his lips met hers, the kiss was gentle, questioning. She answered by slipping her arms around his neck, drawing him closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, Hayes rested his forehead against hers. "I've never met anyone like you, Zara Adams." "Nor I you," she whispered. "Come to Tucson with me tomorrow," he said. "But don't stay there, come back here with me afterward." Zara pulled back slightly, searching his face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want to lose you now that I've found you. I'm saying there's a place for you here if you want it." His eyes, earnest and vulnerable, held hers. "I know it's fast, but I'm asking you to consider it." Zara's mind raced. It was indeed fast, impossibly, recklessly fast. Yet something in her responded to the sincerity in his eyes, to the connection that had formed between them in the desert when he'd shared his last drop of water and again in the quiet evenings on his porch. "Let me think about it," she finally said. "Let's go to Tucson, settle my affairs there, and then I'll give you my answer." Hayes nodded, accepting her terms. Fair enough. He kissed her once more, briefly but with unmistakable feeling, before wishing her good night. In her room, Zara lay awake for hours, her thoughts in turmoil. The practical, Boston-raised part of her insisted this was madness. One didn't fall in love in less than a week, didn't change life plans for a man one barely knew. Yet another part of her, a part awakened by the vast Arizona sky and the touch of Hayes Xavier's hand, whispered that some chances came once in a lifetime. The journey to Tucson the next day was made in a wagon rather than on horseback, more comfortable for the long trip. They spoke easily as they traveled, sharing stories of their childhoods, dreams for the future, and observations about the stunning landscape around them. Yet beneath the comfortable conversation lay an undercurrent of anticipation, the knowledge that decisions awaited them in Tucson that would shape both their futures. The town, when they arrived, was bustling with activity. Tucson in 1879 was a growing community, with adobe buildings lining dusty streets, saloons doing brisk business, and signs of commerce everywhere. Hayes took Zara directly to the hotel, securing her a room for the night. "I'll come for you tomorrow morning," he said as they stood in the hotel lobby. "We'll go to the school board together." Zara nodded, suddenly nervous about what the next day would bring. "Thank you, Hayes, for everything." He tipped his hat, his eyes conveying what he didn't say in the public setting. "Until tomorrow, Miss Adams." Alone in her room, Zara pondered her options. The schoolteacher position had been her lifeline, her chance to support herself honorably after losing everything in Boston. But now, the thought of teaching in Tucson while Hayes returned to his ranch filled her with a sense of loss that surprised her with its intensity. Could she really consider his offer? Return to his ranch, build a life there. What would that life look like? Zara had never imagined herself as a rancher's wife, yet the vision that formed in her mind of mornings with Hayes, evenings under the stars, building something together filled her with unexpected longing. The next morning, Hayes arrived promptly, dressed in his best clothes, still frontier practical but clearly chosen with care. Together they visited the school board office where they met with Mr. Peterson, the chairman. "Miss Adams." "We had given you up for lost," the older man exclaimed when she introduced herself. "When you didn't arrive on the expected stage, we feared the worst." Zara explained what had happened, with Hayes adding details about the Griffin gang's known methods. Mr. Peterson was sympathetic and relieved to see her safe. "The position is still yours if you want it," he assured her. "Term starts in 2 weeks. We can advance you a small portion of your salary to help you get settled." "That's very kind," Zara said, aware of Hayes watching her carefully. "However, I need some time to consider my options. Would it be possible to give you my final answer in a day or two?" Mr. Peterson looked surprised but agreed. "Of course. The school can wait until Friday for your decision." Outside the office, Hayes took Zara's arm gently. "You didn't accept the position." "Not yet," she replied. "I meant what I said. I'm considering my options." Hayes' eyes lit with hope. Does that mean you're considering my offer as well? I am, she admitted, though I still think we're both being incredibly impulsive. He laughed, the sound warming her. Impulsive would have been proposing marriage the day I found you in the desert. This is practically courtship by Boston standards, I'd wager. Zara couldn't help but smile. Hardly. But perhaps Boston standards aren't what matter anymore. They spent the day in Tucson, with Hayes conducting his business at the butcher's shop and general store while Zara explored the town that might have been her home. It was pleasant enough, with signs of culture beginning to take root alongside the rawer elements of frontier life. There was a small library, a ladies' aid society, and even a theater of sorts. Yet as she walked the streets, Zara found herself comparing everything to Hayes' ranch, the open sky, the sense of peace, the feeling of homecoming she'd experienced there. By the time Hayes collected her for dinner, she had reached a decision. They dined at the hotel restaurant, the finest establishment in Tucson, though modest by Eastern standards. Over their meal, Zara studied the man across from her, the strength in his hands, the intelligence in his eyes, the character etched in every line of his face. "I've been thinking about your offer," she said when they had finished eating. Hayes set down his coffee cup, his attention fully on her. "And I'd like to accept on one condition." "Name it," he replied immediately. "I'd still like to teach," Zara explained. "There must be children near your ranch who need education. I could start a small school, perhaps in one of your outbuildings to begin with." Hayes' face broke into a wide smile. "There are at least a dozen ranch kids within riding distance who have never had a proper day of schooling. The Mendez family alone has 5 youngsters." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You're sure about this? About coming back with me?" Zara turned her hand in his, their fingers intertwining. "I'm sure about you, Hayes Xavier. The rest we can figure out together." The next morning, Zara met with Mr. Peterson and declined the Tucson position, explaining her plans to establish a school near the Xavier Ranch. Though disappointed, the chairman offered to send any spare books and supplies that might help her endeavor. With her business concluded, Zara joined Hayes at the general store, where he was purchasing supplies for the return journey and a few extras that made her blush when she noticed them. Fabric for curtains, a set of china teacups, and a silver hairbrush. "For your new home," he explained simply when she questioned the items. They left Tucson that afternoon, the wagon considerably fuller than when they had arrived. As the town receded behind them, Zara felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The road ahead was uncertain, their relationship still new, but the foundation they had built in those few short days felt stronger than anything she had known before. They made camp that night beneath the stars, Hayes setting up a small tent for Zara's privacy. After a simple meal cooked over the campfire, they sat side by side, watching the flames dance. "I have something for you," Hayes said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small leather pouch and handed it to her. Inside, Zara found a delicate silver ring set with a small turquoise stone. She looked up at him, questioning. "It was my mother's," Hayes explained. "One of the few things I kept when I came west." He took a deep breath. "I know we agreed to take things slow, to figure things out together. But I want you to have this as a promise that whatever comes, I'm committed to building a life with you." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes as she slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if made for her. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "and I make the same promise to you." Hayes cupped her face gently in his hands, his kiss sealing their pledge under the vast Arizona sky. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "You know," he said softly, "when I shared my last drop of water with you in the desert, I never imagined I'd be sharing my life with you just days later." Zara smiled, her heart full. "Sometimes the most precious things come when we least expect them." They returned to the ranch 2 days later, greeted enthusiastically by Mrs. Fernandez and the Hands. Word of their understanding had somehow preceded them, and the ranch house had been cleaned and prepared with extra care. Fresh wildflowers adorned the table, and Mrs. Fernandez had prepared all of Hayes' favorite dishes. That evening, sitting on the porch as the sun set over the land that would now be her home, Zara felt Hayes' arm slip around her shoulders. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. She turned to face him, her answer in her eyes before she spoke. "Not one. This feels right, Hayes. It feels like where I'm meant to be." In the months that followed, Zara established her school in a converted storage building on the ranch. 6 children attended at first, the number growing to 15 by year's end as word spread of the quality of education available. Hayes expanded the building, adding proper desks and a blackboard, pride evident in his face whenever he watched Zara teaching. They were married that December in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Mrs. Fernandez decorating the house with pine boughs and ribbons. The school children sang, and the ranch hands stood as witnesses. Zara wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Hayes had ordered specially from Tucson, and he wore a new suit that made him look so handsome it took her breath away. Their life together blended her Eastern refinement with his Western practicality. She learned to ride properly, to help with ranch operations during busy seasons, to appreciate the rhythm of life dictated by the land and seasons rather than society's calendar. He learned to enjoy Shakespeare read aloud by the fire, to dance a proper waltz in their living room, to see his beloved land through her fresh eyes. The school flourished, eventually moving to a purpose-built building halfway between the Xavier Ranch and the nearest town. Zara's reputation as an educator grew, with families moving to the area specifically so their children could attend her school. 2 years after their wedding, their first child was born, a daughter with Hayes' blue eyes and Zara's determined spirit. They named her Hope, for what had brought them together and sustained them through the challenges of building their shared life. On their 3rd anniversary, Hayes took Zara back to the spot in the desert where they had first met. They brought a picnic, setting up in the shade of the same saguaro where she had sought refuge that fateful day. "It looks so different through these eyes," Zara remarked, gazing at the landscape that had once seemed so hostile. "Still harsh, but beautiful too." Hayes pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Like so many things in life, it's all in how you look at it. This desert nearly took your life, but it also brought you to me. And you shared your last drop of water," she reminded him, resting her head against his shoulder. "Best decision I ever made," Hayes said, his voice husky with emotion. "I didn't just share my water that day, I gave you my heart." Zara turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his, "and I've treasured it ever since." As they rode home together, the setting sun painting the desert gold and crimson around them, Zara thought about the journey that had brought her here from a sheltered life in Boston to abandonment in the desert to the rich, full existence she now led. The path had been unexpected, sometimes difficult, but led exactly where she was meant to be. In Hayes Xavier, she had found not just rescue, but redemption, a love that had transformed both their lives from the moment he had shared his last drop of water and his heart.